Welcome to the channel. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon. Why are there not more people talking about how family expectations can hurt us in ways we never see coming? The text message arrived while I was standing in the kitchen stirring my coffee, the kind of ordinary Wednesday morning that usually moved slowly and predictably, with the sound of my neighbor's lawnmower buzzing faintly outside, and my phone lighting up on the counter beside the toaster. At first I didn't think much of it because messages from my mom were common. Reminders about family dinners, photos of her dog, or links to random recipes she swore I should try. So I wiped my hands on a towel and picked up the phone without any sense that my day was about to tilt sideways. The message was short, the kind of casual tone that hides something sharp underneath. "Hey honey, about my birthday dinner Saturday. I think it might be better if you skip this one. It's a small thing and honestly, you just wouldn't really fit the look next to your sister. I hope you understand." I read it twice, then a third time, my brain struggling to translate the words into something reasonable because the sentence didn't seem real, like a typo in reality that should correct itself if I blinked enough. Fit the look. The phrase sat there on the screen, glowing with quiet cruelty. I leaned against the counter, suddenly aware that the coffee in my hand had gone cold, while my mind tried to replay every recent conversation with my mom, searching for context I might have missed. The birthday dinner had been planned for weeks at some trendy restaurant downtown, the kind with moody lighting and expensive cocktails that always showed up on my sister's Instagram stories. My sister Lily had a life that fit those places naturally. She worked in marketing, owned clothes that somehow always looked effortless and expensive, and carried herself with a confidence that made people turn their heads when she walked into a room. I, on the other hand, worked at a public library and spent most days in comfortable sweaters and sensible shoes, a lifestyle that never seemed glamorous, but had always felt quietly right to me. At least, until that text. My phone buzzed again before I could even process the first message, another bubble appearing beneath it. "It's just that Lily's bringing some friends and coworkers and they're all very polished. You know how those things are." I stared at the words until the letters started to blur together. What surprised me most wasn't even the insult itself, it was how casually it had been delivered, like she was explaining why someone shouldn't bring muddy shoes into a clean house. For a moment, I wondered if I had misunderstood something, if maybe this was about limited seating or some complicated family dynamic I wasn't seeing. But the phrase kept echoing back. "You wouldn't fit the look." It felt oddly familiar in a way that made my stomach twist, because if I was honest with myself, there had been smaller versions of this moment my whole life. Little comments about clothes, subtle comparisons between Lily and me, the way my mom would beam with pride at Lily's accomplishments while offering me a gentler, almost apologetic smile when people asked what I did. None of it had ever been quite this blunt before, though. I set the phone down and stared out the kitchen window at the quiet street, trying to steady the sudden rush of emotions rising inside my chest. Hurt was the first one, sharp and immediate, followed quickly by embarrassment because somehow this rejection made me feel like a kid again, standing awkwardly next to my sister at family gatherings, while adults commented on how different we were. Part of me wanted to type a sarcastic response, something biting enough to make her realize how ridiculous the message sounded. But another part of me just felt tired. I thought about the last time the three of us had been together. Brunch a few months earlier, Lily laughing easily while my mom snapped photos for social media. And I remembered a strange moment when I'd caught them both glancing at my thrift store jacket, like it had wandered in from the wrong movie set. At the time, I'd brushed it off as insecurity, but now that memory felt heavier. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, and I realized I was holding my breath without meaning to. Finally, I picked up the phone again and typed the simplest reply I could manage. "Okay." I watched the message send, the small bubble sliding into place beneath her texts, and felt something settle uncomfortably in my chest, like a door closing somewhere inside me. It wasn't just about a birthday dinner or a restaurant table. It was the realization that the distance between Lily and me, something I had always sensed but never fully named, had quietly grown into something my own mother was now willing to enforce out loud. I rinsed my untouched coffee down the sink, grabbed my bag for work, and stepped outside into the cool morning air, wondering when exactly my place in this family had become optional. That evening the house felt unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes even small sounds, like the hum of the refrigerator or the ticking of the clock above the stove, feel strangely loud. I got home from the library around 6, kicked off my shoes near the door, and dropped my bag onto the chair where it always went. But instead of the usual comfort of routine, there was a heaviness following me from room to room. The text from my mom sat in my mind like a pebble in my shoe, small but impossible to ignore. All afternoon at work, I had tried to focus on normal things, checking books back in, helping a teenager find a history textbook, smiling politely at the regular who spent hours reading newspapers near the window. But every quiet moment my brain drifted back to those words. You wouldn't fit the look next to your sister. I heated leftover pasta in the microwave and ate it standing at the counter, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, pausing for a second when Lily's latest post appeared at the top of my feed. She was smiling in a photo with 2 friends at some rooftop bar, the caption full of glittering emojis and excitement about birthday week celebrations. I wondered if my mom had already started planning how perfect Saturday would look in pictures, Lily glowing in the middle, the right people around the table, the lighting just right. The thought made my chest tighten in a way that was less anger and more something quieter, like a long-standing suspicion finally being confirmed. I carried my plate to the sink and rinsed it slowly, trying not to imagine them all sitting at that dinner without me. My phone buzzed again around 7, and for a moment I hoped it might be a second message from my mom, saying she had worded things badly or that she'd changed her mind. Instead, it was Lily. Mom said you're not coming Saturday? Everything okay? I stared at the message for a long time before answering, because I couldn't decide if she genuinely didn't know the reason, or if she had already heard the explanation and simply didn't see anything wrong with it. Growing up, Lily had never been intentionally cruel, but she also lived inside a world where being admired and polished came naturally. And sometimes that meant she didn't notice how the rest of us felt standing slightly outside the spotlight. I typed, erased, and typed again before finally sending. Mom thought it would be better if it stayed small. The lie tasted bitter even though it was easier than explaining the truth. Lily responded with a quick, "Oh, got it," followed by a heart emoji, and that was the end of the conversation, which somehow made the whole situation feel even stranger. If she didn't know, then my mom had decided this quietly on her own. If she did know, then both of them had agreed without questioning it. Around 9, I made tea and curled up on the couch with Netflix playing quietly in the background, not really watching anything but needing the noise to keep my thoughts from circling the same place. At some point my phone lit up again with a call from my mom. I hesitated before answering, my thumb hovering over the screen while a knot formed in my stomach, but curiosity eventually won. "Hey sweetheart," she said in the same cheerful tone she always used, like nothing unusual had happened that morning. For a second I almost wondered if she had forgotten the message entirely, but then she added gently, "I just wanted to make sure you weren't upset earlier." The question felt almost surreal. I sat there staring at the blank TV screen and tried to decide how honest I was willing to be. "You said I wouldn't fit the look," I replied quietly. There was a small pause on the other end of the line, the kind people make when they realize something sounds worse once it's spoken out loud. "Oh honey, that's not what I meant exactly," she said quickly. "It's just that Lily's friends are very stylish, and the dinner is at a place where everyone dresses up, and you know how social media is these days. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable." The explanation floated between us, fragile and unsatisfying. I closed my eyes for a moment and imagined the version of me she seemed to see. Someone awkward standing beside my sister in photos. Someone who disrupted the neat picture she was trying to create. "I'm not embarrassed by who I am," I said slowly, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Another pause followed, longer this time, and I could almost hear her thinking about what to say next. "Of course you're not," she replied, but the sentence felt automatic, like a polite response rather than a real understanding. When we hung up a few minutes later, nothing had been resolved. I placed the phone on the coffee table and leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling while the soft glow of the TV flickered across the room. Somewhere deep inside me, a quiet realization was beginning to form, not loud enough to fully name yet, but strong enough to shift the way I looked at everything that had led to this moment. The next morning started like most weekday mornings in my small house. Coffee brewing slowly, the soft gray light of early day slipping through the kitchen window, my phone buzzing with work notifications before I'd even fully woken up. But something inside me felt slightly rearranged, like a piece of furniture in my mind had been moved during the night. I kept thinking about the conversation with my mom and the strange calm that had followed it, not the calm of everything being okay, but the quieter kind that comes after you finally see something clearly. At the library that day, I shelved books, answered emails, and helped a mother and her son find a stack of mystery novels. Yet underneath all those ordinary moments, my thoughts kept circling back to the same realization. I had spent years quietly adjusting myself to fit the space my family seemed comfortable giving me. Not in dramatic ways, but in little choices, laughing off comparisons with Lily, ignoring the subtle comments about appearance or ambition, convincing myself that being the different one was just part of our family dynamic. By the time I drove home that afternoon, the sky was cloudy and heavy with rain, the kind of weather that made everything feel reflective. And when I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed with another message from my mom. For a moment, I considered ignoring it completely, letting the distance grow naturally, but curiosity nudged me to read it anyway. Lily asked why you aren't coming Saturday. I told her you were busy with work. I hope that's okay. I stared at the screen, feeling that strange calm again because now the situation had shifted slightly. Yesterday it had just been about exclusion, but now it was about secrecy too. She wasn't just asking me to stay away, she was asking me to help protect the illusion she was creating for everyone else. I carried my groceries into the kitchen, unpacked them slowly, and thought about what that meant. Lily clearly hadn't known the real reason, which explained her casual message the night before. For the first time since this started, I found myself wondering not just about my mom's choices, but about my sister's place in all of it. Lily had always seemed effortlessly accepted in ways I never quite was, but that didn't necessarily mean she understood the full picture. I made myself a sandwich and sat at the small table by the window, while rain began tapping lightly against the glass, thinking about the two of them. My mom carefully curating the image of her life, Lily moving confidently through it without questioning much. The thought made me feel less angry and more oddly protective, because if Lily didn't know the truth, she deserved the chance to understand what had happened. I picked up my phone and typed a message before I could overthink it. Actually, I'm not busy Saturday. Mom just asked me not to come. A few minutes passed before the typing bubble appeared. Wait, what? Why would she do that? Did I do something? Reading those words, I felt a complicated mix of relief and sadness. Relief because she genuinely sounded confused. Sadness because it meant this awkward conversation was about to become very real. I explained carefully, trying not to sound accusatory, repeating my mom's exact phrase about not fitting the look next to her. The typing bubble appeared and disappeared several times before Lily finally answered with 3 simple words. She said that? I could almost picture her reading the message, eyebrows pulling together in the same puzzled expression she used when something didn't make sense. For the first time since this whole situation started, I felt like I wasn't standing alone outside the room anymore. Lily called me a few minutes later, her voice quieter than usual. There was a pause where neither of us spoke, the kind of silence filled with unspoken memories from childhood. The family dinners, the comparisons, the subtle way our lives had always been framed differently. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the rain-streaked window, imagining the dinner table, the carefully chosen lighting, my mom smiling for pictures. I don't think crashing the party would help. Lily sighed softly on the other end of the line, and I could hear something shifting in her tone, like she was seeing the shape of this situation for the first time. When we hung up a few minutes later, nothing concrete had been decided about Saturday, but something important had changed. The silence between us had broken, and for the first time in years, my sister and I were looking at the same problem instead of standing on opposite sides of it. By Friday afternoon, the rain had cleared, leaving the neighborhood washed and quiet in that way streets sometimes feel after a long storm, and I found myself staring out the library window more than usual, while trying to focus on the small stack of returns sitting in front of me. Saturday, my mom's birthday dinner, was less than 24 hours away now, and although I had tried to push the whole situation to the back of my mind, the approaching date made it impossible to ignore. The conversation with Lily the night before had changed something subtle but important between us. Instead of brushing the issue aside the way we both had done in the past, she had called again late that evening just to talk. Not about parties or outfits or any of the things my mom seemed worried about, but about childhood memories we hadn't revisited in years. She reminded me of the time we built a crooked treehouse in the backyard with scrap wood and argued about whose turn it was to hold the hammer, and the way our mom had taken dozens of pictures afterward, carefully choosing the one where Lily's hair was perfectly brushed and my muddy jeans were barely visible. At the time, we had laughed about it, but hearing Lily mention it now carried a different weight, like she was noticing a pattern that had quietly existed in our family for a long time. I hadn't known what to say in response, because the truth was, I had realized it years ago. I just hadn't believed it was worth challenging. When my shift ended that afternoon, I drove home slowly, the late sunlight turning everything gold, and I tried to decide what I actually wanted from this situation. For most of the week, my focus had been on the hurt of being excluded. But now another question had started forming underneath that feeling. Did I want to quietly accept the role my mom had assigned me? Or did I want to finally say something about it? The thought made my stomach twist, because confronting her directly felt unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Our family had always handled tension by smoothing it over, pretending things were fine until the moment passed. At home, I made a cup of tea and sat on the couch with my phone in my hand, rereading the earlier messages from both my mom and Lily. The contrast between them was striking. My mom's careful excuses about appearances, Lily's blunt confusion and concern. Around 6, my phone buzzed again with a message from Lily. My chest tightened slightly as I opened the conversation. I stared at the words, surprised by how strongly she had reacted. Growing up, Lily had rarely pushed back against our mom's opinions, partly because she benefited from them, and partly because conflict simply wasn't something our family practiced. I let out a small breath that almost turned into a laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. The pattern suddenly felt painfully clear. Minimize the problem, redirect the blame, maintain the image. "Are you still going tomorrow?" I asked. Lily didn't answer immediately, and the pause stretched long enough that I imagined her sitting somewhere with her phone in hand, weighing loyalty against discomfort. The message sat on the screen like a stone dropped into still water, sending quiet ripples through my thoughts. I hadn't expected that. For a moment I wasn't sure how to respond because part of me didn't want her to sacrifice her relationship with our mom on my behalf. Yet another part of me felt strangely relieved that someone else finally saw how unfair the situation was. "You don't have to do that," I wrote back after a while. Her answer came quickly this time. I leaned back against the couch, feeling the weight of the week settle into something calmer, less sharp than before. Saturday was still coming, and whatever happened tomorrow would probably be uncomfortable for everyone involved. But at least the silence that had surrounded this issue for years had cracked open. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was standing alone outside the picture my mom was trying to create. By the time Saturday evening arrived, the house felt unusually still, almost suspended in anticipation. And I found myself standing at the front door long after the rain had stopped, listening to the distant hum of traffic and the faint clatter of dishes from inside. I hadn't gone to my mom's birthday dinner, and Lily hadn't either, which left the house feeling emptier than usual, but also quieter, safer in a way I hadn't expected. We had spent the afternoon talking over the phone, sharing memories of past birthdays, teasing each other about small childhood embarrassments, and slowly, deliberately rebuilding the connection that years of subtle favoritism and exclusion had strained. When I walked into the living room, Lily was already there, curled up on the couch with a blanket and a mug of tea, scrolling through her phone absent-mindedly but smiling when she saw me. We didn't need words at first, the shared presence was enough. I made myself another cup of tea and sat in the armchair opposite her, letting the warmth seep into my hands as we talked quietly about nothing and everything. The weather, a book I was reading, an upcoming work project, small, ordinary things that felt like a balm to the tension that had wrapped itself around our lives all week. Eventually, the conversation drifted back to our mom, and I felt the familiar knot in my stomach tighten as I prepared to speak. "Do you ever think she even realizes what she said?" I asked cautiously, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't sound accusatory. Lily hesitated, biting her lip slightly before answering. "I don't know. Maybe she thinks she's protecting her image. Or maybe she just doesn't notice how it feels for us," she said softly, and I could almost hear the careful weighing of words behind her tone. We sat in silence for a moment, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall filling the space, and I realized that we were both beginning to understand something important. We didn't have to wait for our mother to recognize her mistake, for us to reclaim a sense of connection and self-respect. I nodded slowly, feeling the tension inside me begin to ease in a way that surprised me. Later, we moved to the kitchen, making a simple dinner together, pasta, vegetables, a little bread. And the act of cooking side by side, chopping and stirring and laughing at small mishaps, carried a weight of its own, almost ceremonial in how ordinary and grounding it felt. The smells of garlic and tomato filled the room, mingling with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint clatter of utensils, creating a small sense of normalcy that I hadn't realized I'd been craving. After dinner, we cleared the dishes in companionable silence, the simple rhythm of water running over plates and silverware creating a quiet space where words weren't necessary. Later, sitting on the couch with mugs of tea again, we started sharing more personal thoughts, small reflections on how the past weeks had affected us, the subtle ways our mother's words had shaped our self-perception, and the little realizations we'd had about protecting ourselves emotionally. I admitted that reading the text had hurt more than I wanted to acknowledge, and Lily shared how she felt invisible in moments when our mother's approval seemed reserved for someone else entirely. Neither of us offered solutions or judgments, just honest acknowledgement, and the act of naming our feelings aloud felt like a quiet kind of therapy, a joint understanding building slowly between us. As the evening wound down, I found myself feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Calm. Not happy, not resolved, but calm. The storm of exclusion and rejection had shifted into a gentle, steady awareness that we could navigate these complicated family dynamics together. Lily leaned back against the couch, sipping her tea, and I realized that for the first time since the message arrived, I wasn't alone in holding the weight of our mother's words. Together, we were building a space where our feelings mattered, where we could acknowledge pain without letting it dominate, and where the bond between us, the sisterly connection that had survived subtle favoritism and comparison, was quietly reaffirming itself. That night, before heading to bed, I lingered at the window for a few minutes, watching the street glisten under the soft glow of the streetlights, feeling the calm settle in my chest. The day hadn't erased hurt, and it wouldn't fix everything. But for the first time, I sensed a pathway forward, steady, cautious, but entirely real, and that quiet hope was enough to carry me into sleep with less tension than I had expected. A few weeks later, Lily suggested a weekend trip, and I hesitated at first, unsure if leaving the house would help or make everything feel more tense. But the thought of spending uninterrupted time together in a neutral space, just the two of us, no judgment, no expectation, was too tempting to resist. We drove for an hour to a small lakeside town, the kind of place where the air smelled faintly of pine and water, and every street seemed quieter than the one before. The car ride was mostly silence at first, punctuated by occasional commentary from Lily about the scenery or her favorite songs playing on the radio. But there was no tension in the air, only the soft hum of tires on wet pavement. And slowly, the quiet allowed conversation to emerge naturally. Once we arrived, we unpacked into a modest cabin, its small kitchen, living room, and deck overlooking the lake feeling like a refuge. I watched Lily arrange her things and felt an odd warmth at the ordinary ritual of settling in. Unpacking, arranging, planning the weekend without the shadow of our mother hovering over us. We spent the afternoon walking along the lake, the water still from earlier rain, reflecting the gray sky and bare branches in a muted silver. Lily and I talked about childhood memories, laughed quietly at small missteps, and even debated the best way to skip stones, all without mentioning our mother once. The absence of that weight, even temporarily, was both strange and liberating. That evening, we cooked a simple dinner together, chopping vegetables and stirring pasta. The warmth from the oven mixing with the faint smell of the lake outside, grounding me in the present moment. We ate at the small table, talking about books, movies, and plans for the coming weeks, and I realized how rare it had been in the past months to have conversations like this, without caution or pain lingering at the edges. Later, sitting on the deck with mugs of tea, we watched the water shimmer in the fading light, the air filled with the faint scent of damp earth. "I've missed this," Lily said softly, not apologizing for the past, but acknowledging the gap we'd felt for months. I nodded, feeling a quiet understanding settle between us. The past couldn't be erased, but space, honesty, and presence could create a small bridge forward. We talked about our mother, carefully naming feelings and boundaries, and for the first time, I felt a sense of alignment with Lily, as though our bond had shifted from tentative solidarity into something more deliberate, intentional. We played card games late into the evening, laughed at our clumsy strategies, and at one point, our hands brushed over the deck of cards, lingering longer than necessary. A small acknowledgment that closeness was returning in quiet, human ways. The weekend was a series of these small, meaningful gestures. Shared coffee on the deck as mist rolled over the lake, laughter at inside jokes from childhood, quiet moments side by side, reading or just watching the water. By the time we packed up to leave on Sunday, the cabin felt charged with the kind of subtle warmth that comes from facing discomfort together and finding mutual ground. Driving home, Lily chatted about her upcoming week, and I listened, occasionally responding, occasionally smiling at her stories, noticing that the tension that had followed us for months had softened. Pulling into the driveway, the familiar neighborhood looked the same, yet everything felt subtly different. We had survived time together without conflict, built trust quietly, and created a space where honesty and companionship could coexist. For the first time in weeks, I felt a quiet sense of hope. Not naive, not perfect, but real and steady, that no matter what came next, Lily and I could face it together, stronger and more aligned than we had been in years.